In a landmark 7-2 decision, the Supreme Court has struck down the Trump-era tariffs imposed under the guise of national security. This historic ruling marks a pivotal moment in the ongoing debate over the balance of power between the executive branch and the judiciary, and it signals a dramatic shift in the nation's approach to international trade policy. This ruling dismantles a trade strategy that has shaped global commerce and American business for nearly a decade. The tariffs, once seen as a shield for domestic industries, have now been deemed an overreach, sending shockwaves through the interconnected world of trade and manufacturing. The court's message is clear. There are limits to executive power in trade. No president, regardless of intent, can bypass the checks and balances that define American democracy. The era of America First tariffs is over, and the consequences are rippling through Washington and Wall Street. Lawmakers, investors, and business leaders are all scrambling to understand what this new landscape means for the future. For years, these tariffs sparked fierce debate. Supporters claimed they protected American jobs, while critics argued they hurt consumers and provoked retaliation. The divide was not just political, but personal, affecting families, workers, and businesses across the country. Now, the highest court has sided with free trade advocates, redefining the boundaries between the executive and legislative branches on trade. This decision could inspire new legislation and reshape how future trade disputes are handled. The legal crux. Did the president overstep authority under Section 232 of the Trade Expansion Act of 1962? The court's answer was decisive, emphasizing the importance of congressional oversight in matters of national economic policy. By rejecting the broad national security justification, the court sets a precedent that will constrain future administrations. This ruling will likely influence how presidents use emergency powers in the years to come. Stock markets have surged, but the path forward is uncertain as industries adjust to a new reality. Some sectors may benefit, while others face new challenges as global competition intensifies. The big question: will America return to free trade or chart a new, more cautious course in globalization? As the dust settles, the world watches to see how the United States will redefine its role in the global economy. To truly understand the impact of this landmark ruling, we first need to revisit the basics. What exactly are tariffs, and why do they matter so much in global trade? Tariffs are essentially taxes placed on imported goods. Their main purpose is to make foreign products more expensive, which in turn is meant to protect domestic industries from overseas competition and encourage consumers to buy locally made products. Tariffs are one of the oldest tools in economic policy, dating back centuries. They're controversial because, while they can support domestic jobs and industries, they also tend to raise prices for everyday consumers, making goods less affordable. Many economists argue that tariffs act as a hidden tax on a country's own citizens, since the increased costs are usually passed down the supply chain, ultimately landing on the shoulders of consumers and businesses alike. The Trump administration's decision to impose sweeping tariffs in 2018 marked a dramatic shift away from decades of U.S. free trade policy, signaling a new, more confrontational approach to international trade. Unlike previous measures, these tariffs were broad and far-reaching, impacting major industries such as steel, aluminum, electronics, and many others across the manufacturing sector. The result was a global trade war, as countries like China quickly retaliated with their own tariffs on American goods, escalating tensions and sparking uncertainty in international markets. This tit-for-tat cycle of tariffs and counter-tariffs created widespread uncertainty and disruption, affecting businesses, workers, and consumers around the world. After years of legal challenges and heated debate, the battle over these tariffs has now culminated in today's historic Supreme Court decision, which could reshape the future of American trade. With this decision, the stage is set for a new era in U.S. trade policy, one that will have lasting consequences for the global economy. The tariffs were central to President Trump's America First agenda, aimed at reversing decades of job losses blamed on unfair foreign competition. The administration accused China of currency manipulation, subsidies, and intellectual property theft, arguing that tariffs would level the playing field. Invoking Section 232, the White House claimed national security required a strong domestic steel and aluminum industry. This allowed the president to bypass Congress and impose sweeping tariffs. The real goal pressure China to change its economic practices and encourage U.S. companies to bring manufacturing home. This was a radical departure from previous administrations, which saw engagement with China as a path to reform. The tariffs became the most visible weapon in a new era of U.S.-China competition. Today's ruling marks a fundamental reassessment of that strategy. The Supreme Court's decision wasn't about the wisdom of tariffs, but about presidential authority. Chief Justice Roberts' majority opinion focused on whether national security could be stretched to justify broad economic measures. The court said, no Section 232 was meant for narrow, clear-cut threats, not as a tool to reshape entire industries. The justices warned that a broad reading would give the president a blank check to impose tariffs at will, an unconstitutional delegation of Congress's power. The ruling drew a line between targeted tariffs on metals and the much broader tariffs against China. The court found the administration used national security as a pretext for a trade war, which requires explicit congressional approval. The message: if you want a trade war, go to Congress first. This decision reasserts the constitutional balance of power in trade. At its core, the ruling reaffirms the Constitution's separation of powers. Congress regulates commerce, the president enforces the law. The legal challenge argued the president had overstepped, imposing what amounted to taxes without congressional consent. While Congress has delegated some trade authority, the court ruled those powers have limits. The dissent argued the president deserves deference on national security, but the majority disagreed. Economic competition alone isn't a national security threat. The court clarified that only Congress can fundamentally alter the nation's economic relationships. This sets a high bar for future presidents seeking to use national security as a justification for tariffs. The decision is a major check on executive power in trade. The constitutional boundaries are now clearer than ever. The economic fallout from the tariffs was immediate and far-reaching. Studies show the costs were mostly borne by U.S. importers, businesses, and consumers, raising prices on everything from washing machines to cars. Retaliatory tariffs from China hit American farmers hard, slashing exports and forcing billions in government aid. The hoped-for manufacturing renaissance never materialized. Instead, companies shifted supply chains to other countries, not back to the U.S. The trade war created uncertainty, discouraging investment and slowing economic growth. The Congressional Budget Office estimated the tariffs reduced U.S. GDP. While some industries benefited from protection, most Americans paid the price through higher costs and lost opportunities. The tariffs became a costly experiment in economic nationalism. The Supreme Court's decision now forces a reckoning with those results. The challenge: how to support American workers without self-inflicted economic harm. Wall Street's reaction to the Supreme Court's decision was swift and positive. Stock markets surged, led by sectors hurt most by tariffs: retailers, tech, and manufacturers. Investors see the end of tariffs as a boost: lower input costs, higher profits, and renewed certainty. Companies can now plan and invest without fear of sudden trade barriers. Some domestic steel and aluminum producers saw their stocks fall, reflecting the end of their protected status. But overall, the market's rally signals confidence in a more stable, open trading environment. Analysts agree. Removing tariffs is like taking the brakes off the U.S. economy. The winners are businesses, consumers, and global supply chains. The transition will have losers, but the market believes the benefits far outweigh the costs. The Supreme Court's decision is sending shockwaves around the globe. U.S. allies, especially in Europe and Canada, welcomed the ruling as a return to predictable, rules-based trade. China's response was measured, but the underlying tensions with the U.S. remain. Countries like Vietnam and Mexico, which benefited from trade diversion, now face new competition as supply chains shift again. The World Trade Organization praised the decision, seeing it as a boost for multilateral dispute resolution. The court's narrow definition of national security aligns the U.S. more closely with international trade law. The ruling signals that even the world's largest economy is subject to the rule of law. The global trading system may be stronger for it. The world is watching to see what America does next. The end of the tariff era opens a new chapter for U.S. trade policy, one filled with both uncertainty and opportunity. As the dust settles, the nation faces a pivotal moment that will shape its economic future for years to come. Unwinding the tariffs will be a complex process. Industries and workers will need time to adjust to new realities. Some sectors may benefit quickly, while others could struggle to adapt, requiring careful planning and support. Some will call for new protections or targeted support as they face renewed global competition. Others may advocate for retraining programs and investment in emerging industries to help workers transition. The political debate over trade will intensify, with some pushing for a return to free trade and others urging caution. Lawmakers will be challenged to find common ground amid competing interests and public opinion. The core challenge remains: how to address China's economic practices without broad tariffs. Policymakers must find ways to protect American interests while avoiding a new era of trade wars. Future administrations will need new, legally sound tools, working with allies, investing in innovation, and strengthening domestic industries. Collaboration and forward-thinking strategies will be essential to stay competitive. The Supreme Court has torn down a wall of protectionism, signaling a shift in the legal landscape and forcing policymakers to rethink old assumptions. Now, policymakers must decide what to build in its place. The choices they make will determine the nation's economic direction and its role in the global marketplace. The lesson is clear: in a global economy, isolation comes at a cost. Embracing change and openness can drive growth, while retreating inward risks stagnation. The next chapter will test America's ability to compete and cooperate on the world stage, demanding resilience, adaptability, and vision from leaders and citizens alike.